Hey y'all, it's Laura and welcome back to a new series. This one's all about embellishment clusters, which is something that has been highly requested. So this is a quick 6-video series and I'm going to be going over the 5 types of embellishment clusters that I make the most often. And then the 6th video will discuss positioning of clusters, which is something that I know a lot of you have had questions about, and I have some very easy ways to think about how to put your clusters around your photos and around your layout in general. Now, I do find it easier to create playlists to keep all of these series intact in one place so you can find them easily. So if you go to my profile, and there's a little bar across the top that has home, videos, etc. And one of them is playlists. And if you click on it, you can find each of my series all compacted into one nice little clean list, which I adore. So there will be a full playlist for this series as well. So if you've missed any of the videos, you can go back and check those out. Now let's jump over to the desk and dive into today's cluster.
Today's cluster of embellishments is the horizontal. A lot like last week's video on the vertical, the horizontal tends to be a larger cluster of embellishments that go in one direction. So in this case, we have a couple of tags, a couple of florals, an epoxy flare, so a fairly large cluster here that's moving from left to right. I most often use a horizontal cluster to fill in gaps. So in this case, my photos are off-centered by quite a lot. And while I fixed that at the bottom, this awkward space with my title tucking right in, up here at the top, I've filled in the space with this large cluster. Now with horizontal clusters, unlike verticals, I do have a tendency to want a base. So quite often I will have a strong horizontal line. In this case, there's a label and a word phrase here functioning as the base. And then I build up around it. Having that base for me makes me feel more secure that it is anchored with the photo. So here's another example. Again, we're coming across with a base using a label and this ephemera piece, that's our base, and then building off of it. So this one again has a tag and florals and enamel dots, and it's just a nice long base across the top. This one also has a smaller version here at the bottom. Again, we have this little ticket underneath as our base. I've added a word phrase on top and then just built up some pretty little things around the outside. In this case, I've even added a couple of banners hanging down, but it's still a horizontal because that is the base. That is the shape of this cluster. Now on this example, we are once again using a label as a base. So I have 2 strips of paper behind my photos, and I have this nice large label as a base, this nice ephemera piece as part of the base, and then I've added on to it. In this case, we have a couple of shapes and an epoxy flare, a very simple horizontal cluster. Unlike the last couple that were rather detailed and had a lot of pieces to them, this one only has 5. It has 2 pieces to the base and it has 3 simple shapes. So these don't have to be super detailed either. It really depends on how busy your layout is. As you can see, this one is quite busy. There's a lot going on. And so I'm not wanting to draw too much attention to this cluster because it's just going to negate attention from the photos. Now, in this 9x12 layout, we're going even smaller with this top cluster. Again, we have this happy memory piece as part of our base. I have a ticket stuffed behind it as another part of the base. It just helps to anchor it in place, and for me, gives me a place to start. I then add in more rounded, whimsical shapes around the outside so that it doesn't feel so linear and clunky, because too many rectangles, I find, tends to feel a bit harsh and clunky. But if you add softer rounded items as well, that helps it to just kind of soften the whole look of the page and gives it a more whimsical feel. Now we have another long horizontal piece at the bottom, and this again is made up of some bases and rounded pieces. So again, we've got a label and we've got a wood veneer piece. These are hard rectangles. They are great for bases. And then we've added some rounded items along the sides to soften the look. With this layout, we've pretty much gone all horizontal clustering, and I really like this design. If you're familiar with my go-to design series, this is a shelf. So these are shelves that I've popped some horizontal clusters on top of. Now in this case, we're using a word phrase as a base, just adding a large flower, very simple horizontal cluster. It doesn't have to be heavily detailed. There doesn't have to be 10 pieces involved. Quite often, I do more like this, where I have a large label and a word phrase as the base, then use florals and puffy stickers to soften it out. Up here at the top, same thing. I have a little arrow label underneath as a base, using my title and some florals to soften the look. I absolutely love a nice soft layout. That's very, very common for me. I don't do a ton of hard angles without adding those little bits of softness. So that is the horizontal cluster. Let's go ahead and put one together and see what we can make on our own. Now for our horizontal cluster, as I talked to you about in the examples, I tend to start with 2 pieces as a base, something larger like a label or a journaling spot and a word phrase. And what this does is it often fills in the gaps between photos. So for example, if I have 2 photos and they are wedged together just like this, okay? Either because they're a different orientation like these 2 are, or because I've purposely staggered them, I've created this space in between, this little corner that I need to fill. And these big bases work really well for that. They're very, very good for that. So go ahead and use them in a slight overlap, either this direction, whichever you like. However your photos allow. We'll go this way for now because there's more open space this direction, and then start filling in the gaps. So now that I have a very linear look to this cluster, I'm gonna bring in some things to soften it, whether it's heart shapes, circle shapes, rounded shapes, or in this case, florals. And I just keep layering until it feels full, until it feels complete, until I believe it's a nice rounded cluster and it's no longer too linear. So now we could do something simple by just adding a couple of little flowers there on the edge to round out that corner so it's not so harsh. This doesn't have to be complicated. Try to make it as easy as possible when you're first getting started, and just these 5 pieces made a really nice cluster that filled in that gap. That's it for our horizontal clustering. If you have any questions about this one, please let me know in the comments below. I sure hope this series has been helpful for you guys. We have more videos to come. Be sure to come back every single Saturday for the month of October and a little bit of November to see what's up next. Until next time, bye.